The dust hadn't settled from the stagecoach before Rebecca Walsh stumbled down its steps with nothing but a worn carpetbag and terror in her eyes, scanning the main street of Santa Rosa, California, like a hunted animal searching for shelter in 1878. She pressed herself against the wooden storefront, her dark auburn hair falling loose from its pins, her green eyes darting between every passing rider and wagon. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the small town nestled in Sonoma County, but Rebecca barely noticed the heat. All she could think about was putting as much distance as possible between herself and San Francisco, between herself and Marcus Thornhill, the man whose ring she had fled from 3 nights ago. Her hands trembled as she clutched the carpetbag tighter. She had exactly $17 to her name, the clothes on her back, and nowhere to go. The stagecoach driver had already moved on, and the other passengers had dispersed into the town. Rebecca stood there, frozen with indecision, until a woman's voice cut through her panic. "You look lost, dear." Rebecca turned to find an older woman with kind eyes and silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. She wore a simple calico dress and carried a basket of vegetables. "I just arrived," Rebecca managed, her voice hoarse from dust and fear. "I'm looking for work, any kind of work." The woman studied her for a moment, taking in her fine dress now wrinkled and stained from travel, her quality shoes worn thin from running. "I'm Martha Green. My husband and I run the general store. We don't have positions available, but I know the Oakley Ranch is looking for help. Their housekeeper took ill last month and had to move back east with her daughter." The Oakley Ranch, Rebecca's heart hammered. A ranch meant isolation, distance from the main road, a place where someone looking for her might not think to search. About 5 miles north of town. "Patrick Oakley runs it, inherited it from his father 2 years back. He's a good man, fair employer. Lost his wife in childbirth 4 years ago along with the baby. He's been managing alone ever since with just his ranch hands, but that big house needs a woman's touch." Rebecca felt a pang of sympathy even through her own fear. "How would I get there?" "I'll send my son Robert to take you in our wagon. He's making deliveries this afternoon anyway." Martha smiled warmly. "Come inside, have some water and wash your face. You look like you've been through an ordeal." Rebecca followed Martha into the general store, grateful beyond words. As she washed the dust from her face and hands in the back room, Martha packed up supplies for the ranch delivery. Rebecca caught her reflection in a small mirror and barely recognized herself. 3 days ago, she had been preparing for her wedding to Marcus Thornhill, one of San Francisco's wealthiest merchants. She had been wearing silk and pearls, living in his mansion on Nob Hill, believing herself fortunate to have caught his eye. Then she had discovered the truth. The locked room in the east wing that Marcus had forbidden her to enter. The night she couldn't sleep and heard the sobbing. The moment she picked the lock and found Sarah, Marcus's first wife, the wife everyone believed had died 5 years ago. Sarah, thin as a skeleton, her wrists scarred from chains, her mind broken from years of imprisonment. "He'll do the same to you," Sarah had whispered. "Once the wedding happens, once you're legally his, he'll lock you away too. He likes to collect beautiful things and keep them where only he can see them." Rebecca had run that very night, taking Sarah with her. She had used every connection she had to get Sarah to a hospital, to doctors who could help her, to lawyers who would listen. But Marcus Thornhill had power and money, and Rebecca knew that if he found her before she could testify, before Sarah's case could be heard, she would simply disappear. So she had bought a ticket on the first stagecoach heading north and hadn't stopped running. Martha's son Robert was a cheerful young man of about 19 who asked no probing questions as he helped Rebecca into the wagon. They rode through the rolling hills of Sonoma County, past vineyards and wheat fields, until they turned onto a dirt road that led to a sprawling ranch. The Oakley ranch was larger than Rebecca had expected. The main house was a two-story structure of whitewashed wood with a wraparound porch, clearly built by someone who had meant to fill it with family. Corrals and outbuildings spread out behind it, and she could see cattle grazing in the distant fields. A man emerged from the barn as they approached. He was tall, probably in his early 30s, with dark brown hair that touched his collar and eyes the color of weathered bronze. He wore dusty work clothes and moved with the easy grace of someone completely comfortable in his own skin. When he looked up at the wagon, Rebecca felt an unexpected flutter in her chest. "Afternoon, Robert," the man called out. His voice was deep and steady. "Afternoon, Patrick. Brought your supplies and something extra." Robert hopped down and helped Rebecca from the wagon. "This lady just arrived in town looking for work. Ma said you might have a position for a housekeeper." Patrick Oakley's eyes settled on Rebecca, and she felt the weight of his assessment. But unlike Marcus's gaze, which had always made her feel like a possession to be acquired, Patrick's look was searching and somehow respectful. "That's so." He stepped closer, wiping his hands on his pants. "I'm Patrick Oakley. This is my ranch. Rebecca Walsh." She extended her hand and he shook it firmly. His palm was calloused and warm. "I'm a hard worker, Mr. Oakley. I can cook, clean, mend, manage a household. I need employment and lodging." "You have references?" Rebecca's throat tightened. "No, sir. I left my previous situation rather suddenly." Something flickered in Patrick's eyes. Understanding, perhaps. He didn't press for details. "Can you start today?" "Yes." The relief made her lightheaded. "Room and board plus $30 a month. You'll have your own room upstairs. I have 3 ranch hands who take meals here. I expect the house kept clean, 3 meals a day, laundry done. I'm not a harsh employer, Miss Walsh, but I do expect honest work." "You'll get it, Mr. Oakley. I promise you that," he nodded slowly. "Robert, help me unload these supplies. Miss Walsh, the house is open. Your room is the second door on the right upstairs. Get yourself settled." As Rebecca climbed the porch steps and entered the house, she felt the tension in her shoulders ease slightly. The interior was clean but clearly neglected. Dust covered the furniture in the parlor, and the kitchen, though organized, had the sterile feel of a place where cooking was merely functional. Upstairs, her room was small but comfortable, with a bed, a dresser, and a window overlooking the eastern fields. She set down her carpetbag and sank onto the bed, finally allowing herself to breathe. She was safe. For now, she was safe. Over the next few days, Rebecca threw herself into work. She scrubbed the house from top to bottom, aired out the rooms, washed the curtains and linens. She discovered that Patrick kept a well-stocked pantry and that the ranch hands, Tom, James, and young Billy, were polite and appreciative of decent meals. Patrick himself was courteous but distant. He rose before dawn, worked until sunset, and spoke little at meals. But Rebecca noticed things about him. The way he was gentle with the horses, how he paid his men fairly and never raised his voice. The sadness that sometimes crossed his face when he looked at the empty chair at the head of the dining table. On her 5th day at the ranch, Rebecca was hanging laundry when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Her heart seized with panic, and she dropped the shirt she was holding, ready to run. But it was only Patrick, returning from checking the northern fence line. He dismounted and led his horse to the water trough, then noticed her pale face and the way she had backed toward the house. "Miss Walsh, you all right?" "Yes, I'm fine." She forced herself to pick up the dropped shirt. "You startled me, that's all." Patrick walked closer, his brow furrowed. "You've been jumpy since you arrived. Every time someone rides up, you look like you're about to bolt." Rebecca focused on pinning the shirt to the line. I'm just adjusting to ranch life. That's not it. His voice was gentle but firm. I've seen enough scared animals to recognize fear. Someone's after you, aren't they? Her hand stilled on the clothesline. For a long moment, she considered lying, but something about Patrick Oakley made her want to tell the truth. Maybe it was the kindness in his eyes. Maybe it was the bone-deep weariness of carrying the secret alone. Yes, she whispered. Patrick was quiet for a moment. You want to tell me about it? Rebecca looked around at the empty fields, the wide sky, the safety of this place. Then she looked at Patrick and saw only patience and concern. Can we sit? She asked. They moved to the porch steps. Patrick sat a respectful distance away, waiting. And Rebecca, for the first time since fleeing San Francisco, told someone the whole truth. She spoke of Marcus Thornhill, of the engagement, of finding Sarah locked away like a prisoner. She described running with Sarah through the streets of San Francisco in the dead of night, getting Sarah to help, then realizing that Marcus would never let her go free to testify against him. She explained how she had used the last of her own money to get away, how she had chosen Santa Rosa almost at random because it was small and quiet and far from the city. He has resources, she finished quietly. Money, influence, men who work for him. If he finds me before Sarah's case is heard in court, before she can officially testify to what he did, I'll disappear. And Sarah will have no one to speak for her. Patrick was silent for a long time after she finished. His jaw was tight, and his hands were clenched on his knees. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and controlled. How long until the case is heard? I don't know. A few months, maybe longer. The lawyers I connected Sarah with are building a case, but these things take time. And you've been carrying this alone. It wasn't a question. I didn't know who to trust. I still don't know if I should have told you. You could decide I'm too much trouble, that you don't want to risk your ranch by harboring someone Marcus Thornhill is looking for. Patrick turned to look at her directly, and the intensity in his bronze eyes made her breath catch. Miss Walsh, Rebecca, look at me. She met his gaze. I don't run from bullies, and I don't abandon people who need help. You did a brave thing, getting that woman out of there and trying to bring justice. If this Thornhill comes looking for you here, he'll have to go through me first. Mr. Oakley, you don't understand what kind of man he is. I understand exactly what kind of man he is. I've known men like him, men who think power and money put them above decency and law. But this is my land, Rebecca, my home. And as of 5 days ago, you became part of my household. That means you're under my protection. Tears burned in Rebecca's eyes. Why would you do this for me? You barely know me. I know enough. Patrick's voice softened. I know you're a hard worker who doesn't complain. I know you risked everything to save a woman you barely knew. I know you're brave enough to run from a powerful man rather than become his victim. That's enough. He could bring trouble here. Then we'll face it. Patrick stood and offered his hand to help her up. In the meantime, you've got work to do, and so do I. But Rebecca, no more looking over your shoulder like a hunted animal on my land. You're safe here. I give you my word. As Rebecca took his hand and stood, she felt something shift inside her chest. It wasn't just relief, though that was part of it. It was something warmer, something that scared her almost as much as Marcus had, trust. She was beginning to trust Patrick Oakley. The summer days passed in a rhythm of work and quiet moments. Rebecca transformed the house into a real home, filling it with the smells of fresh bread and herb gardens, polishing the neglected furniture until it gleamed. Patrick's ranch hands openly praised the changes, and even Patrick, taciturn as he was, thanked her for her efforts. But more than the work, Rebecca found herself drawn into the life of the ranch. She learned the names of all the horses, started helping Billy, the youngest ranch hand at 21, tend the vegetable garden. She sat on the porch in the evenings after the dinner dishes were done, watching the sun set over the hills, and she watched Patrick. She noticed how he was always the first one working and the last to quit, how he checked on each of his men throughout the day, not as an overseer but as someone who genuinely cared about their well-being, how he talked to his horses with affection, how he was patient with young Billy's mistakes. One evening, about 3 weeks after her arrival, Patrick joined her on the porch after supper. It had become something of a habit, though they didn't always talk. Sometimes they just sat in comfortable silence, watching the day fade. "You settling in all right?" Patrick asked. "Better than all right. This place feels like a home." "It hasn't felt that way in a long time." Patrick's voice was quiet. "Not since Elizabeth died." It was the first time he had mentioned his wife's name. Rebecca waited, sensing he needed to talk. "She was excited about the baby," Patrick continued. "We'd been trying for 2 years. When she finally got pregnant, she was so happy. We both were. I built a cradle, started adding on to the house, made all these plans." He paused, his throat working. "Then everything went wrong during the birth. The doctor couldn't save either of them. I held my son for about 5 minutes before he stopped breathing. Elizabeth never regained consciousness." "I'm so sorry, Patrick." Rebecca's heart ached for him. "I blamed myself for a long time. If I hadn't gotten her pregnant, if I'd taken her to a city hospital instead of using the local doctor, if I'd done 100 different things." He looked at her. "Grief can make you do strange things. I worked myself nearly to death that first year trying not to feel it." "What changed?" "I realized that Elizabeth wouldn't have wanted that. She loved this ranch, loved the life we were building. Destroying myself wasn't honoring her memory, so I started living again, not just surviving." He smiled slightly. "But I never could make the house feel like a home again, until you arrived." The words hung in the air between them, charged with meaning. Rebecca felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I'm glad I can help," she said softly. Patrick's hand moved across the space between them and gently covered hers where it rested on the porch rail. "It's more than help, Rebecca. It's life. You've brought life back into this place." She turned her hand over, letting their palms touch. The connection was electric, thrilling and terrifying all at once. She had never felt this way with Marcus, this sense of rightness, of two people finding each other across the chaos of the world. "Patrick, I don't know how long I can stay. When the trial happens, I'll have to go back to testify." "I know, but you're here now." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "And I'd be lying if I said I haven't come to care about having you here, care about you." Rebecca's breath caught. "I care about you too, more than I should, probably. But Patrick, I'm still legally engaged to Marcus. I never had a chance to formally break it off, and my life is complicated and dangerous right now." "I'm not afraid of complicated. And as for dangerous, well, I already told you I'd keep you safe." Patrick shifted closer. "I'm not asking for promises, Rebecca. I'm just asking if maybe you feel the same pull I do, the same sense that this, us, means something." "I do," she admitted. "Every day I feel it more, but I'm scared, scared of bringing trouble to you. Scared of caring about someone again and losing them. Scared that I'm not thinking clearly, that I'm just vulnerable and grateful." "Are you?" Patrick's eyes searched hers. "Is that all this is?" Rebecca thought about it honestly. She thought about how her heart lifted every morning when she heard Patrick's footsteps in the kitchen. How she found excuses to be wherever he was working, just to catch glimpses of him. How safe she felt in his presence, not because he was protection, but because he was Patrick. "No," she said finally. "It's not gratitude, it's not vulnerability, it's real." Patrick smiled and the expression transformed his whole face. "Then that's enough for now. We'll take it slow. We'll figure the rest out as we go." He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. But Rebecca didn't want to pull away. When his lips met hers, soft and questioning, she leaned into the kiss. It was nothing like the possessive kisses Marcus had given her. This was tender and respectful and full of promise. When they pulled apart, both of them were smiling. "I should go check the barn before bed," Patrick said, though he made no move to leave. "And I should finish cleaning the kitchen," Rebecca replied, also not moving. They sat there for another hour, hands linked, talking about everything and nothing. And for the first time since fleeing San Francisco, Rebecca allowed herself to imagine a future that wasn't defined by fear. The peaceful days couldn't last forever. Rebecca knew that, but she let herself pretend they could. August melted into September, and the ranch thrived under the California sun. Rebecca's garden produced abundantly, and she spent her days canning vegetables and fruits for the winter. Patrick brought in a strong hay harvest, and the cattle were fat and healthy. Their relationship deepened in quiet ways. Stolen kisses in the barn. Hands held under the dinner table when the ranch hands weren't looking. Long conversations on the porch after everyone else had gone to bed. Patrick never pushed for more than Rebecca was ready to give. And Rebecca found herself falling in love with his patience, his strength, his fundamental goodness. She had just pulled a fresh apple pie from the oven one afternoon in late September when she heard unusual sounds from outside. Hoofbeats, several horses moving fast. Rebecca's blood turned to ice. She pulled off her apron and moved to the window, careful to stay out of sight. 5 riders were approaching the house, and even from a distance she recognized the leader. Marcus Thornhill sat tall in his saddle, dressed in expensive riding clothes that looked absurd out here in ranch country. His blonde hair was slicked back, his face set in determined lines. The 4 men with him looked like hired guns, the kind of men who did whatever they were paid to do without asking questions. Rebecca's heart hammered against her ribs. He had found her. She heard Patrick's voice outside, calm but firm. "This is private property. State your business." "I'm looking for a woman." Marcus's cultured voice carried clearly. "Rebecca Walsh. I have reason to believe she's here." "Don't know anyone by that name. Don't lie to me, cowboy." "I've tracked her to Santa Rosa, and the general store owner mentioned her boy had brought a woman matching her description out to this ranch. Rebecca is my fiancée, and she ran away from our wedding. I've come to bring her home." Rebecca watched as Patrick crossed his arms over his chest. Tom, James, and Billy had emerged from various outbuildings and stood nearby, sensing trouble. "Like I said, don't know anyone by that name. Now you need to leave my property." Marcus's face hardened. "I'm a wealthy man, Mr. Oakley. I can make it worth your while to tell me the truth." "Name your price." "I'm not interested in your money. You need to leave. Now." "Or what?" Marcus smiled coldly. "You and your ranch hands will force us. I have 5 armed men here. I suggest you cooperate." Rebecca couldn't let Patrick get hurt protecting her. Before she could talk herself out of it, she opened the door and stepped onto the porch. "I'm here, Marcus." Every head swiveled toward her. Patrick's expression turned thunderous, but Rebecca shook her head slightly, begging him with her eyes to let her handle this. Marcus's face lit up with triumph. "Rebecca, darling, there you are. We've been so worried about you. Save it, Marcus. I know what you are. I know what you did to Sarah." The triumph faded, replaced by cold calculation. "I don't know what stories you've been telling yourself, but Sarah was ill. She needed care. She needed freedom. She needed justice. And she's getting it. The lawyers are building a case against you right now. Sarah is prepared to testify to everything you did to her. Sarah is insane. No court will believe her." Marcus dismounted and took a step toward the porch. "You're coming back with me, Rebecca. You belong to me. I belong to myself." Rebecca's voice shook but held firm. "I'm not going anywhere with you. I'm afraid you don't have a choice." Marcus gestured to his men. Bring her." Two of the hired guns started forward, but Patrick moved faster. He positioned himself at the base of the porch steps, his hand resting on the gun at his hip. She said no. "This doesn't concern you, rancher. Everything that happens on my land concerns me, and the lady has made herself clear. You need to leave." Marcus's face twisted with rage. "Do you know who I am? I have influence from here to Sacramento. I could destroy you. Maybe. But you'll have to shoot me first to get to her, and I don't think you want to add murder to whatever charges are already piling up against you in San Francisco." For a tense moment, everyone froze. Rebecca could barely breathe, watching the standoff. Marcus's hired guns looked uncertain, clearly not expecting armed resistance from a group of ranch hands who looked more than willing to back up their boss. Then Marcus played his final card. "Fine. If you won't give her to me, I'll have the local marshal do it. Rebecca, you stole money from me when you left, a considerable sum. That's theft, darling. I'll have you arrested." "I stole nothing from you. I took only what was mine." "Can you prove that?" "Because I have receipts showing that $5,000 went missing from my safe the night you disappeared. Your word against mine, and I think we both know who the law will believe." Rebecca felt sick. He was right. His money and influence would ensure any legal battle went his way, at least in the short term. But Patrick stepped forward, his voice dangerous. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to get back on your horse and ride out of here. Miss Walsh is under my protection, and if you try to take her by force, you'll have to go through me and every man on this ranch. If you try to file false charges, I'll hire the best lawyers in California to fight them, and we'll countersue for harassment and the unlawful imprisonment of Sarah. We'll make so much noise that every newspaper from here to the East Coast will hear about it. Is that really the kind of attention you want?" Marcus's jaw clenched. The calculation was clear on his face. He was weighing his options, trying to decide if Rebecca was worth the risk of everything coming to light. "This isn't over," he finally said. "Rebecca, you'll regret this. You'll regret choosing this dirt farmer over me. The only thing I regret is ever accepting your proposal." Rebecca's voice was steady now. "Leave, Marcus. Go back to San Francisco and pray that Sarah's lawyers show you more mercy than you showed her." Marcus stared at her for a long moment, hatred burning in his eyes. Then he mounted his horse and jerked the reins. "Let's go." The 5 riders thundered away, leaving dust and tension in their wake. Rebecca's legs went weak, and she sat down hard on the porch steps. Patrick was beside her instantly, his arm around her shoulders. "You all right?" "I don't know." She was shaking. "He found me. I thought I'd have more time." "He's gone now. But he'll come back, or he'll send others. Patrick, I can't stay here. I'm putting you and everyone on this ranch in danger." Patrick's arm tightened around her. "Look at me, Rebecca." She turned her tear-filled eyes to his. "You're not leaving. Do you understand me?" "I meant what I said. You're under my protection, and I don't back down from threats. He could ruin you. Let him try. Rebecca, I've lost everything that mattered to me once before. I survived it. But I'll tell you right now, if you get on a horse and ride away from here because you think you're protecting me, that would be worse than anything Thornhill could do. Patrick, I can't ask you to risk everything for me. You're not asking. I'm choosing." He cupped her face in his hands, his bronze eyes intense. "I love you. I should have said it before now, but I love you, and I'm not letting some rich coward take you away from me without a fight." Rebecca's breath caught. "You love me." "I do. I think I've loved you since the day you arrived here, looking terrified but determined. You've brought my world back to life, Rebecca. I'm not giving that up. I'm not giving you up." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I love you too. God help me. I love you so much it scares me." Patrick kissed her then, deep and fierce and full of promise. When they pulled apart, he pressed his forehead to hers. "Then run to me," he said quietly. "Stop running away from things and run to me. Let me keep you safe. Let me love you. Let me give you the life you deserve." Yes. The word was a sob and a laugh all at once. "Yes, Patrick. I'm done running." They sat there on the porch steps, holding each other, while the sun climbed higher in the California sky. Tom, James, and Billy had quietly gone back to work, giving them privacy. Inside the house, the apple pie was cooling on the counter, filling the air with the scent of cinnamon and home. The next few weeks were tense. Patrick hired 2 more ranch hands, men he trusted who could help watch the property. He rode into Santa Rosa and spoke with the town marshal, explaining the situation and ensuring that if Marcus tried to file false charges, there would be people who knew the truth. Rebecca wrote to the lawyers handling Sarah's case, explaining what had happened and asking for updates. The response came 2 weeks later and brought good news. Sarah's testimony had been heard, and with the evidence of the locked room and medical reports documenting her physical condition and years of imprisonment, a warrant had been issued for Marcus Thornhill's arrest. He was wanted for kidnapping, false imprisonment, and attempted murder. Marcus Thornhill was on the run now, his influence crumbling as the scandal broke across San Francisco's high society. "It's over," Rebecca whispered when Patrick read her the letter. "It's really over." Patrick pulled her into his arms. "You did it. You saved her and you brought him to justice. We did it. I could never have stood up to him without you." Rebecca looked up at Patrick, her heart overflowing. "You gave me the courage to stop running. You always had that courage. I just gave you a safe place to stand." That night after dinner, Patrick asked Rebecca to walk with him. They strolled through the fields as the sun set, turning the sky shades of orange and pink. When they reached the top of a small hill overlooking the ranch, Patrick stopped and turned to face her. "Rebecca Walsh, I know we haven't known each other long. I know your life has been turned upside down this year, but I also know that I love you more than I thought I could love anyone again. You've given me back my life, my home, my hope." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. "I'd be honored if you'd agree to be my wife." Inside the box was a simple gold band with a small sapphire. It wasn't expensive or flashy. It was honest and beautiful, just like Patrick. "Oh, Patrick," Rebecca's hands flew to her mouth. "I know it's not fancy. I'm just a rancher and I can't give you mansions or servants or high society. But I can give you my heart, my loyalty, and every bit of love I have. I can give you a home and a family and a life worth living. Will you marry me?" "Yes," Rebecca laughed through her tears. "Yes, 1,000 times yes. I don't want mansions or high society. I just want you. I want this life, this beautiful, honest, real life with you." Patrick slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her thoroughly. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were grinning like fools. They were married on a crisp October morning in Santa Rosa's small church. Martha Green helped Rebecca prepare, lending her a beautiful cream-colored dress that had belonged to Martha's mother. Tom, James, and Billy stood up with Patrick, dressed in their Sunday best and grinning widely. Half the town attended, curious about the rancher who had finally decided to marry again, and charmed by Rebecca's quiet grace. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Patrick kissed Rebecca with such tenderness that several women in the congregation dabbed at their eyes. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and food enough to feed an army. The community celebrated with them, and as Rebecca danced with her new husband under the stars, she marveled at how far she had come. 6 months ago, she had been running for her life. Now she was dancing at her wedding, surrounded by friends, married to a man who loved her truly and deeply. "Happy," Patrick murmured in her ear. "Happier than I ever imagined I could be. Good. Because I plan to spend the rest of my life making sure you stay that way." The seasons turned and life on the ranch settled into a comfortable rhythm. Rebecca thrived in her role as Patrick's wife, managing the household and taking on more responsibilities around the ranch. She learned to ride well, helped with the cattle when needed, and became a respected member of the community. In December, she received a letter from Sarah. The woman had recovered remarkably well with proper care and treatment. She was living with a cousin in Oregon, slowly rebuilding her life. Marcus Thornhill had been captured trying to flee to Mexico and was awaiting trial. Sarah wrote that she would never be able to repay Rebecca for her courage, for saving her life and giving her justice. Rebecca read the letter to Patrick that evening, tears streaming down her face. "She's safe. She's healing. It was worth it. Everything was worth it." Patrick held her close. "You're a hero, Rebecca Oakley. My brave, beautiful hero." In March of 1879, Rebecca discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with joy, and she admitted to Patrick a bit of fear. What if something goes wrong like it did with Elizabeth? She asked one night, her hand resting on her still flat belly. Patrick's face was serious. "I won't lie and say I'm not scared too, but you're strong, Rebecca, and we'll take every precaution. We'll get the best doctor, and if we need to go to San Francisco for the birth, we will." "You'd leave the ranch for that. I'd leave everything for you and this baby. You're my world now." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Rebecca bloomed with health, and Patrick was attentive to the point of being overprotective. He hired additional help so Rebecca wouldn't have to do heavy work, and he rode into town weekly to check with the doctor. On a warm November afternoon, Rebecca went into labor. The doctor arrived quickly, and Martha Green came to help. Patrick paced the downstairs like a caged animal, his ranch hands keeping him company and trying to distract him. When the baby's cry finally rang through the house, Patrick took the stairs 3 at a time. He burst into the bedroom to find Rebecca propped up on pillows, exhausted but glowing, holding a small bundle. "It's a boy," she said softly. "A healthy, perfect boy." Patrick approached slowly, as if in a dream. When he looked down at his son, at the tiny face and waving fists, tears streamed down his cheeks. "He's beautiful. Would you like to hold him?" Patrick carefully took the baby, cradling him against his chest. The infant settled immediately, and Patrick felt something break open inside him. All the grief he had carried for 4 years, all the pain of losing his first son, transformed into overwhelming love for this new life. "Thank you," he whispered to Rebecca. "Thank you for this gift, for trusting me enough to build this life with me. There's nowhere else I'd rather be." Rebecca smiled tiredly. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy. "How about Samuel, after my father? Samuel Oakley." Rebecca tested the name. "I love it. Hello, Samuel. Welcome to your home." The baby opened his eyes, unfocused and dark, and Rebecca felt her heart expand impossibly. This was her son. This was her family. This was the life she had built from the ashes of her escape. Samuel grew into a healthy, cheerful baby who loved being outside and watching the ranch activities. Patrick was a devoted father, carrying Samuel around in a sling while he worked, talking to him about the horses and cattle and crops. Rebecca watched her husband with their son and fell even more deeply in love. 2 years later, Rebecca gave birth to a daughter they named Caroline, who had her mother's auburn hair and her father's bronze eyes. And 3 years after that, another son arrived, whom they named Thomas after Patrick's best ranch hand, who had become like family. The house that had once been so empty and silent filled with the noise of children, with laughter and love and life. Patrick expanded the ranch, bringing on more help and acquiring more land. Rebecca started a small business selling her preserves and baked goods in town, earning a reputation for quality. Together, they built something lasting and meaningful. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Patrick and Rebecca stood on the same hill where he had proposed. Their 3 children were playing in the yard below, watched over by Billy, who was now the foreman and had married Martha Green's daughter. "You ever regret it?" Patrick asked, his arm around Rebecca's waist. "Running away from that life of wealth and status?" Rebecca leaned into her husband's solid warmth. "Not for a single second. Marcus's money was built on cruelty and control. This life, our life, is built on love and hard work and honesty. I wouldn't trade it for anything." "Even when the well runs dry or the cattle get sick or Caroline spills ink all over your good dress," Rebecca laughed. "Even then. Especially then. Those are real problems, Patrick. Real life. Not the gilded cage Marcus wanted to trap me in." Patrick turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "I thank God every day that you got on that stagecoach to Santa Rosa, that you found your way to my ranch, that you trusted me enough to tell me the truth. You made it easy to trust you. You still do." Rebecca rose on her toes to kiss him. "You kept your promise, Patrick Oakley. You kept me safe. You gave me a home. You gave me forever." "Forever isn't long enough," Patrick murmured against her lips, "but it's a good start." They walked back down the hill hand in hand as the sun set over their ranch, over the life they had built together. The house glowed warm with lamplight, and the sound of their children's laughter carried on the evening breeze. Rebecca had run from a monster and found a hero. She had run from captivity and found freedom. She had run from false promises and found true love, and she had finally stopped running because Patrick Oakley had given her something worth staying for. He had given her a home, a family, and a love that would last all their days. Inside the house, Caroline was begging for a story before bed. Samuel was showing Thomas how to build a tower with wooden blocks. The kitchen smelled of the stew Rebecca had prepared that morning. The curtains she had sewn fluttered in the breeze from the open windows. This was home. This was love. This was the life worth fighting for. Patrick caught Rebecca's hand as they reached the porch. "I love you, Mrs. Oakley." "I love you too, Mr. Oakley. Always." They entered their home together, ready for whatever the future might bring, knowing that as long as they faced it together, they could handle anything. Years continued to pass in golden succession. Samuel grew into a strong young man who loved the ranch as much as his father did, often riding out with Patrick to check the herds and mend fences. Caroline became a skilled horsewoman with a sharp mind for numbers, helping her mother with the business accounts. Thomas, the youngest, inherited Rebecca's nurturing nature and declared at 8 years old that he wanted to be a doctor someday. Rebecca and Patrick supported each child's dreams, even when it meant letting them forge their own paths. They had built their family on freedom and trust, and they extended that same philosophy to their children. The town of Santa Rosa grew over the years, and the Oakley Ranch became one of the most respected operations in Sonoma County. Patrick's fair treatment of workers and Rebecca's community involvement earned them friendships that lasted lifetimes. Martha Green remained close to the family until her passing in 1895, and on her deathbed, she told Rebecca that bringing her to the ranch had been one of her proudest moments. "I saw 2 broken people who needed each other," Martha said, "and I was right." Sarah, Marcus's first wife, also remained in Rebecca's life. She had married a kind teacher in Oregon and started a charity helping women escape abusive situations. She visited the ranch several times over the years, and watching her healthy and happy, living freely, reminded Rebecca why the risk and fear had been worthwhile. Marcus Thornhill had been sentenced to 20 years in prison for his crimes. He died there in 1889, and when Rebecca received word, she felt only a distant sadness for the man who had wasted his life on control and cruelty, rather than love and connection. On a spring morning in 1898, 20 years after Rebecca had arrived in Santa Rosa, she stood in the garden she had planted so long ago. Her hair, now streaked with silver, was pulled back in a practical bun. Her hands, weathered from years of work, were gentle as she tended the roses. Patrick came up behind her, his own hair gray now, his face lined with age but his eyes still bright. He wrapped his arms around her waist and rested his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Everything. How far we've come, how lucky we are. Not luck, love." Rebecca turned in his arms to face him. "Both, I think. I was lucky that your ranch needed a housekeeper, lucky that Martha Green was kind to a stranger, lucky that you were the man you are. And I was lucky that you were brave enough to run from danger and strong enough to trust me when I said I'd protect you." Samuel came riding up the path then, his own wife beside him. They had recently taken over primary management of the ranch, allowing Patrick to slow down and enjoy his grandchildren. Two little ones rode in front of Samuel, shrieking with delight. Caroline arrived in a carriage, her husband and 3 children with her. She had married a businessman in town and ran her own successful bakery now. But she never missed Sunday dinner at the ranch. Thomas was away at medical school in San Francisco, but he had sent a letter that arrived that morning, full of his studies and achievements and promises to visit soon. The family gathered on the porch and in the yard, the house Rebecca had once entered as a desperate woman seeking safety, now bursting with life and love. Children played tag around the oak tree Patrick had planted for Samuel's birth. Women laughed in the kitchen, preparing the meal together. Men talked about the ranch and the town and the changes coming as a new century approached. Patrick and Rebecca watched it all from their usual spot on the porch, holding hands like they always did. "We did good, didn't we?" Rebecca said softly. "We did better than good. We did extraordinary." Patrick lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles. "You did extraordinary. You turned a house into a home, a rancher into a family man, and a life into something worth celebrating. You did the same for me. You turned my fear into courage, my running into staying, my desperation into joy." As the sun began to set that evening, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, the family gathered around the long table Patrick had built when Samuel was born. There were 23 people now, counting children and grandchildren, spouses and close friends who were like family. Patrick stood at the head of the table to say grace, as he always did, but before he bowed his head, he looked at Rebecca and smiled. "I want to add something tonight," he said. 20 years ago, Rebecca came into my life and changed everything. She brought light where there had been darkness, hope where there had been grief, and love where I thought love could never exist again. She is the reason this table is full. She is the reason this house stands strong. She is the reason we are all here together." "Patrick," Rebecca murmured, embarrassed but pleased. "No, let me finish. Rebecca, you ran from a man who wanted to cage you and you ran to me. That was the greatest gift I ever received. I promised I would keep you safe forever, and I have done my best to honor that promise every day of our marriage." "You have," Rebecca said, tears in her eyes. "You always have. Then here's my promise for the next 20 years and the 20 after that, however long we have." Patrick's voice was thick with emotion. "I will keep loving you with everything I am. I will keep building this life with you. I will keep thanking God that you chose me." The table erupted in applause and cheers. Samuel raised his glass. "To Mother and Father. The best parents, the best partners, the best example of love I've ever known." Everyone drank to the toast, and as the meal began, Rebecca felt a profound sense of peace settle over her. This was what she had run toward, even when she didn't know it existed. This love, this family, this home. Later that night, after the guests had departed and the children were settled in their various rooms, Patrick and Rebecca prepared for bed. Rebecca sat at her vanity, brushing her hair, and caught Patrick's reflection in the mirror. He was watching her with such love that it took her breath away, even after 20 years of marriage. "What?" she asked, smiling. "Just remembering the first time I saw you, how scared you were, how determined. I knew right then that you were someone special." "I thought you were the most intimidating man I'd ever seen," Patrick laughed. "Intimidating, in a good way, strong, solid, someone I instinctively knew I could depend on." Rebecca set down her brush and went to him. "I was right." Patrick pulled her into bed beside him, tucking her against his side like they had done every night for 2 decades. "I love you, Rebecca Oakley." "I love you, Patrick Oakley." They drifted off to sleep in each other's arms, secure in the life they had built and the love that sustained them. The years that followed were gentle ones. Patrick and Rebecca watched their children raise their own families, passing on the values of hard work, honesty, and love. They saw the turn of the century, celebrated the new age, and marveled at the changes in the world. When Patrick passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1912, at the age of 66, Rebecca grieved deeply, but not bitterly. They had been given 34 years together, 34 years of love and partnership. She had been there when he took his last breath, holding his hand just as he had held hers through every challenge and joy of their life together. His last words to her were, "Still the best decision I ever made, keeping you safe." And hers to him were, "Still the best decision I ever made, running to you." Rebecca lived another 8 years, surrounded by her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She spent her days in the garden, telling stories about the ranch's history, passing down recipes and wisdom. She never remarried, telling anyone who asked that she had already experienced the great love of her life, and once was enough. When she passed in 1920 at the age of 65, she was buried beside Patrick on the hill where he had proposed. The entire town attended her funeral, testament to the life she had lived and the love she had given. Her tombstone reads simply, "Rebecca Walsh Oakley, beloved wife, mother, and friend. She ran toward love and found forever." The ranch stayed in the family, passed down through Samuel and his children. The house remained standing, sheltering new generations. The roses Rebecca planted still bloomed every spring. And the story of how Patrick and Rebecca found each other, how love saved them both, was told and retold, becoming part of the family legend. It was a story about courage and trust, about choosing love over fear, freedom over captivity, truth over lies. About a woman who ran from danger and a man who offered her safety. About 2 broken people who healed each other and built something beautiful from the ashes of their pasts. It was, simply, a story about running toward love and finding home. And it was true in every word, every moment, every heartbeat. Years after both Patrick and Rebecca had passed, when Samuel was an old man himself, he sat on that same porch with his own grandchildren gathered around and told them the story. "Your great-grandmother arrived in Santa Rosa with nothing but a carpetbag and fear in her heart," he said. "And your great-grandfather gave her everything: safety, love, a home, a family. He taught all of us what it means to be honorable, to stand up for what's right, to love with your whole heart." "Did great-grandma ever regret running away?" one of the children asked. Samuel smiled. "Not once. She told me many times that the day she ran was the day her real life began, because she ran toward something better, she ran toward love. The children absorbed this, understanding in the way children do that they were part of something larger than themselves. They were part of a legacy built on courage and love. As the sun set over the ranch that evening, casting the same golden light it had cast for decades, the old house stood strong. Inside, the kitchen table that had held so many meals and conversations remained in its place. Upstairs, in what had once been Rebecca's room, one of Samuel's daughters now slept. The ranch continued. The family continued. The love continued. And somewhere in the fading light, if you believed in such things, you might catch a glimpse of two figures walking hand in hand across the fields. A woman with auburn hair and a man with bronze eyes, together forever in the place where their love had grown and flourished. They had run from their separate pasts and run toward each other. And in doing so, they had found not just safety or comfort, but the kind of love that transcends time and death, the kind of love that becomes legend. Patrick had promised to keep Rebecca safe forever, and he had kept that promise in this life and beyond. Their story ended not with tragedy or loss, but with the triumph of love over fear, of courage over cruelty, of two hearts finding each other in the vastness of the California territory and deciding, against all odds, to build something lasting. They had run toward each other. And they had found forever. The ranch still stands today, though it has changed hands several times and been modernized considerably. But locals say that on quiet evenings, especially in the spring when the roses bloom, you can still feel the love that Patrick and Rebecca built into every board and beam. And if you stand on the hill where Patrick proposed, where they were eventually buried side by side, you might understand what it means to run toward love instead of away from fear. You might understand what it means to find someone who says, with absolute conviction, "Run to me. I'll keep you safe forever." And you might understand what it means to be brave enough to do exactly that, to run toward love, to run toward home, to run toward the person who makes running worth it, because they're standing there with open arms and an open heart, ready to catch you and keep you and love you forever. That was Patrick and Rebecca's story. A story of the Wild West, yes, with its dangers and challenges and vast open spaces. But more importantly, a story of the human heart, a story of love, a story that ended exactly as it should, with two people who found each other, chose each other, and loved each other through every moment of their lives. A story with a happy ending, earned through courage and trust and unwavering devotion. The kind of ending everyone deserves, the kind of ending Patrick and Rebecca fought for and won, forever.